Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka Bangers, aka MBB, back with another video. Now, this was a huge weekend for Pokemon Pocket. There were 4 different tournaments that went on over a span of 2 days. I've got to give you the information you need just in case you're a player that's trying to build a competitive deck, or maybe you are brand new to the game and you're wanting to see what the tournament scene is like, what the deck breakdowns look like. I've got charts, I've got data, I've got takeaways, all for you in this video, but I don't want to waste any more of your precious time. So let's just dive into the first tournament. So starting with this tournament, this is hosted by some of our Brazilian friends, and this was the smallest of the tournament, tournaments that I'm going to be talking about in terms of the number of people that entered, but you're going to start to notice a theme very quickly as we start cycling through these tournaments. The first thing that you'll notice is there's a big presence of Mewtwo, Pikachu, and Charizard. They're going to be all over these tournaments. Looking at the standings, you might not be surprised to know that Pikachu EX was able to take this event down. Now, if you notice even closer by looking at the screen, there is actually 2 Pikachu decks that made the finals. One of them had Raichu and Lieutenant Surge, and the other one didn't. And in the mirror, this is a really big takeaway. In the mirror, if you have Raichu, you are probably slightly favored in the mirror, okay? And that just kind of comes down to Raichu being able to one-shot every single Pokemon in the matchup. So basically, if you can find a way to get Raichu in Surge after even knocking out, any Pokemon, it might be a game-clinching knockout. So very good. And watching, I think I was able to watch one of these final games, and yeah, it just kind of came down to, they went second, and they also had Raichu. So it's kind of like, well, that's a lot to overcome. So congrats on the win. But let's get to the second big tournament that I want to talk about that happened this weekend out of the 4, and this was hosted by Ursi. So shout out Ursi. So this was an event that had $100 in the prize pool, which really cool because not every event right now is having a prize pool. But looking at the results, this was the standings. Let's see. Let's get Swiss rounds. After the Swiss round, so Mewtwo Gardevoir was at the top. Then you have some Pikachus, and then some other rogue decks. But what I want to show you is actually the data. So shout out to Bela for putting this together. Bela does a great job of getting these charts out ASAP. And this is a breakdown, so you can pause the video, kind of take a look at all these, because I'm not going to say every single deck. I'm just going to talk about a few of them really quickly. So 34 Mewtwo decks, 21 Charizard decks, and 20 Pikachu decks. So that's kind of the big 3 right now. So you probably saw it in my thumbnail. We're very much in a rock paper scissors meta now, and what you're going to see in the data, and in this particular event for Ursi, I had to comb through the data to look at matchups, because again, on Limitless, let me flash back to this. On Limitless, you can actually look at the metagame, then you can click on the deck, and then you can click matchups and see how the particular deck you're looking at did against these matchups. Now, here's the thing. Because this event had a lot of people that dropped or no-showed, the numbers are really skewed. But when I scanned through the data, here's the biggest takeaway I can tell you. Pikachu EX versus Mewtwo and Gardevoir was roughly a 50-50. Like roughly a 50-50 coin flip, okay? However, you can go ahead and take it to the bank that Pikachu is favored in the Charizard matchup. And if you notice, again, let's take a look at this data again. There were 21 Charizard decks. So, that's a lot of Charizard, especially compared to some of the other events that we've had where Charizard has basically been non-existent. And you might be wondering, MBB, why is Charizard being played? Here is the rock, paper, scissors. You probably noticed in the thumbnail, again, I'll allude to that. Pikachu and Mewtwo is kind of a coin flip. Charizard beats Mewtwo. But Mewtwo, has a really big issue with Charizard, but Pikachu beats Charizard. Okay, so it's like a weird rock, paper, scissors kind of meta. And if you want to compete in this meta, If you want to bring a deck that's viable to hit the top cut and potentially win, you need to be able to beat 2 out of these 3 decks at the very minimum, or at least compete with both of them at a high level. Okay? Because what's going to happen is this field is going to roughly, shift. It might be 40 Pikachu now and then, next weekend's event, and 20 of the other 2. It's going to continuously shift until people kind of, really solve this meta. But it seems like for the moment, we are entering the first era of a rock, paper, scissors meta in Pokemon Pocket. Okay, so really interesting data to take away. Looking at the top cut, notice 7 Mewtwo's, 3 Charizard, 4 Pikachus. Okay, 1 Marowak and 1 Articuno Greninja. But again, looking at the results, after everything was all said and done, I believe, let's get the standings. Here we go, combined. And again, you look at the winner. The winner happens to be another Pikachu EX deck. So, one thing to kind of notice on this, Raichu and Lieutenant Surge wins the mirror again. So it was a mirror match. Actually, this was the match that I watched where the person went second both games and had Raichu. So this is actually the one that I watched. I didn't get a chance to watch the Brazilian one because it was a little bit smaller. I don't think there was any streams. But again, we had a Pikachu final mirror match, and the Raichu deck was able to come out on top because there's just a lot of advantage with Raichu and Surge in the mirror. Okay, and the other deck, it's nothing. They're not playing anything crazy. The spiciest deck is probably the one that played in the Reddit tournament. We'll talk about that here in a second. But again, it's just standard Electrode, Pikachu EX, Zapdos. The spiciest thing is probably the base Zapdos, right? So again, red card continues to be a factor in these tournaments as well. So, that's a whole nother video. But again, that kind of gives you a breakdown of the tournament. So shout out to the winner of the Ursi tournament as well. And sticking with the theme of Ursi, really cool. She ends up going ahead, and she actually went undefeated in Swiss in one of the other tournaments. So we'll talk about that last. But this was the Reddit tournament. So some people are familiar with the Pokemon Pocket Reddit and the Discord that they link. They hosted their own tournament, and the first place prize was a Discord role. No, necessarily not a monetary thing or anything like that. And this was played in one day. So again, these past 2 tournaments that I've been talking about, they've all been played on one day. And the third tournament that I'm talking about right now is no different. They were played in one day. Okay, so looking at the results, really interesting deck that ended up kind of getting second place. We'll take a look at that. And this was I believe this is second place after Swiss, if I remember correctly. But Alakazam and Weezing. So that was after Swiss. Combined, it ended up being, you guessed it, another mirror match with 2 Pikachu decks. And again, that's one of those things that it just kind of is what it is. And then if you look, here is the winning deck list. This one was probably the strangest out of all of them. Just 6 basics, and they ended up just being able to immediately get to their Pikachus in some games, or immediately get to their Zapdos in some games. And you would think in this matchup, the deck that is playing Raichu and Lieutenant Surge would have a little bit of an advantage, but it seems like they just kind of got outsped. I didn't get a chance to watch this game at all. I have no idea what happened during the match. But that's kind of the one win that the non-Surge and non-Raichu Pikachu variant was able to secure in the finals in the mirror. So again, you could probably dive more into the data. I'm going to probably sound, this is going to be a personal take, okay? So please don't get offended. Please, nobody get offended. I think this tournament was weaker, okay? No doubt it had a lot of people, but I think that this tournament was weaker in the sense that I think that there were a lot of people that probably played in this event. Maybe it was their first tournament. And when we take a look at this last tournament, I think it's probably the most competitive tournament that they have right now for Pokemon Pocket. But I just think that the average player in this tournament was probably a little bit not as good compared to the other tournament. And I think that you can kind of see that in some of the statistics in the deck breakdowns of this tournament. Again, that's just my opinion. And again, like if you had to choose, one event to play this weekend, you'd probably play in the one that had prize support. And again, the only prize support for this one was a Discord role. So I think that the more competitive players probably lean towards the Ursi tournament and then the last tournament that I'm going to talk about here in a second. That's just, again, my personal opinion. That's not throwing any shade. I'm glad that they're hosting a tournament. I'm glad that they came around and decided to host one before pre-launch or before the launch of the global game. Really cool. So shout out to them. But again, you're going to see a lot of the big three decks here. Again, Mewtwo, Charizard, and Pikachu. So that's kind of the big takeaway from this weekend. If you were playing Venusaur and Exeggutor, I'm just going to be honest. I think that window has closed. I don't think that was a good pick to bring to any of these events because I think that as soon as we saw Charizard start to get more popular and people start to counterpick the deck that won, and also, it's just kind of one of those things where it's probably not a good idea to just pick the deck that just won unless it's just really, 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 really strong. And again, the reason why I was able to win with Venusaur and Exeggutor, obviously I had great coin flips in some of the games. And you're able to get there sometimes. But more than anything, it was just a good meta call where at the time, there just wasn't a lot of fire. I was fine with my matchup going into Mewtwo, and I knew that if I played against Pikachu, I had a great shot. So now with more fire, Ninetales and so on, and Zard, it's just, in my opinion, it's just not a good pick, okay? But again, that's just my thoughts. Okay, so let's get to the last tournament, and then I'll give you my takeaways. And by the way, I just want to say thank you again for all the people that have been tuning in, all the people that have been subscribing and doing the shout outs across all the various platforms. It means so much to me. I'm hoping that, I can really help a lot of people take their game to the next level, whether you're a beginner or where you're a player that, is really analyzing, am I using things like Professor's research in the most valuable way? And it's been incredible to see people adopting that idea of, when do I play Professor's research and, different cards like Red Card, which again, I have a video on Red Card coming out very soon. But let's talk about these results from the Pokemon Pocket Legends League. This is the 4th tournament that they've hosted for this particular from this particular host. I believe I was the winner of the 3rd one. So actually, I think this is technically the 5th tournament because they had Little Legends as well. But anyways, so looking at the top cut. So shout out to Ursi, undefeated through Swiss with Charizard and Moltres, and they ended up taking a tie with a Pikachu player. So there was a tie, so that way they guaranteed their entrance into the top cut, because honestly, playing when you're 7-0 in an 8-round tournament, it doesn't matter if you win or you lose. So they just took the draw, and because of tiebreakers, Ursi ended up getting the #1 seed. By the way, I think the #1 seed is cursed for Pokemon Pocket Legends League. I think it's cursed, man. Literally everybody who gets first ends up losing in the top cut. Okay, like literally, like first round of top cut, they lose. It's. I'm telling you, I don't want it. I never want to be 1 seed in this tournament, man. Not until the jinx is broken. So we'll talk about the matchups here in just a second, but let me give you a visual. So again, shout out to Bela for putting this together, but this is a visual. Again, you can pause, check out some of the decks, and I'm going to shout out some of the decks as well here in a second, but I just wanted to make sure I got through the results. So right here, you can see the big 3 was alive and well for this tournament, and this tournament actually took place over a span of 2 days. So the first day was Swiss, and then the next day was just the top cut. So really cool that they're able to break that into a kind of a nice little event on the weekend in 2 days. And obviously they've got prize support, which is really awesome for people that end up, maybe you're from Brazil and that money goes a long way for you. And that's so cool. And that's one of the big reasons why I'm so happy that they're doing that. So looking at the deck breakdown, 45 Mewtwo's, 38 Pikachus, and 23 Charizards. So again, the big 3 is alive and well. And again, if you remember, Charizard beats Mewtwo. Mewtwo and Pikachu is kind of a coin flip, and then Pikachu beats Charizard. So that's just kind of the rock, paper, scissors right now. Now, there were some spicy picks. You'll notice that there was some Starmie decks that popped up, and I think that that's a direct answer to seeing the popularity of Charizard. So that just kind of seems to be what a lot of people were thinking. So they tried to make their own meta call, which is, again, really cool to see. When you take a look at the breakdown of the top cut, so this was the top 26 players, okay? So looking at this, you can see a more even split between Pikachu and Mewtwo, and then there was only 3 Charizard decks. Then looking at that, there were actually more water decks than Charizard decks, that's pretty crazy, right? Then we had a pretty spicy Alakazam deck that I'll talk about here in a moment. But again, just looking at the results here. So again, that was the Swiss results. Let's look at the combined results. So this is at the end. So we had four out of the top 4 decks. We had 3 Pikachu EX decks. Okay. So again, like Pikachu, right now, if you're trying to build a deck and bring it to a tournament, obviously you need to beat 2 out of the 3 of the big 3. But Pikachu seems to be just extremely dominant because it doesn't have stage 2s, right? Unless you want to technically classify Lieutenant Surge as a stage 2, right? Because you need Raichu and then you need the Lieutenant Surge, so it kind of works like a stage 2. But the thing is, you can play Surge and Raichu in the same turn, so it's kind of like a pseudo stage 2. But anyways, obviously Pikachu has been dominating, and if you've been keeping count, yes, Pikachu swept all 4 of the events with a bunch of mirror matches in the finals. So that should tell you something really, really crazy, the power level of that deck. But right now, again, just kind of taking a look at the list really quickly, you'll notice there is Raichu and Lieutenant Surge in the first place deck. And then you look at the second deck, there is no Raichu, there is no Surge. So again, looking at the matchups, again, of all the finals, I believe, were Pikachu decks, right? And Raichu and Lieutenant Surge won 3 out of the 4 matches. So something to keep in mind when you're trying to decide, how do I want to build my Pikachu deck. One more piece of data. I actually scanned through the Mewtwo and Gardevoir data, and I was able to kind of compile the numbers and put them together. And again, this is just, it's about 50-50. Literally in the Legends tournament, it's more 50-50. However, if you look at the Reddit tournament, the one that I went over previously, the matchup was actually way more favored for Pikachu in terms of percentage. And, again, I just think that, I kind of throw that out because 2 of the other 3 tournaments, right, basically said, hey, it's more of a 50-50. So I'm of the believer, and I think that I'm in the camp of Mewtwo versus Pikachu is more of a coin flip. But however, there are clear advantages to Pikachu versus Charizard. Pikachu should win a lot of the time. And then when it comes to Mewtwo versus Charizard, Charizard should beat Mewtwo a lot more times than it loses, or at least more than it loses. And again, if you're wondering, like, why is that the case, MBB? It just comes down to, if you look at the HP and the damage that Mewtwo EX does. Again, Mewtwo EX is just not able to one-shot with Charizard, so Charizard is able to basically one-shot, and then whatever comes in is able to one-shot again. The only way that Mewtwo can really get away with it in that matchup is having double Mewtwo, or in some form or fashion, and most likely needing double Gardevoir. And then on the other end too, if the Charmeleon line doesn't show up, then obviously Charizard can lose as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. But let's get into some of my key takeaways. And again, thank you for watching so far. By the way, let me give you these graphs just in case you want to screenshot them. I'll try to leave the link in the description as well. It's like a Discord message, so the link is really long. But here is the total player breakdown for Ursi's tournament. Here is the top cut for Ursi's tournament. Okay, giving you some time. Here is the Legends League breakdown for their tournament. Again, both these tournaments with prize support. Again, shout out Bela, appreciate you. And then here is the top cut breakdown. Okay, so again, just so you have that data, and my face is not covering it. Okay, so let me quickly give you some spice to end the video, and maybe give you some little bit of thoughts to think about as you go try to brew some of your own decks. By the way, Blaine might be dead. I don't know. I think Charizard just kind of bodies it, and that's kind of one of the big issues. But Blaine might be kind of dead, if I'm honest. Might be dead. So that's why I'm not spending too much time on Blaine, even though I thought he was going to be a big player. So just kind of wrong on that. But Kronos streams on Twitch. I've checked in on their stream a few times. They brought some spice. They were bringing Melmetal and Weezing with the Koga supporter. So they ran the little Weezing engine. And if you're wondering why they did that, so Weezing is going to poison their active Pokemon. If it's in the active spot, then they can pick up the damage with Koga. I think most people know that. Where Melmetal comes in is Melmetal actually one-shots Pikachu. It can also one-shot Starmie if it's been poisoned. It can also one-shot other things that could have potentially been poisoned or chipped at before as well. So it's actually pretty interesting to see that it's not bad into Pikachu, but obviously, there's a lot of other matchups that you have to also think about as well. And, at the end of the day, like, you do need to make sure that you draw Weezing. And that's kind of hard to do sometimes in a deck with not a ton of draw power, or a game with not a lot of draw power. So again, consistency issues may be kind of a problem. But again, really cool deck going into Pikachu. If every one of your decks is, or every one of your matchups is Pikachu, you're going to probably enjoy that. Next, highlighting Jeff. If you've seen any of his other content, Jeff is he's pretty good at the games that he plays, and he tends to try to put his own flavor into the decks that he creates. And this was really cool because he actually decided to play two pretty interesting combinations here. So he had the Exeggutor lineup with double base Exeggutor and one Exeggutor EX. So we had some similarities there in thinking. And then you also have the Greninja lineup, which is really spicy considering, you're playing two different energies. He did not take one of the energies out. He played water and water and grass energies. And then the other pretty spicy thing here was far-fetched. So, game plan. And the idea, by the way, if you're trying to figure out, like, why are they playing multiple evolution slides? So the more evolution Pokemon that you play, the more you're going to evolve. It's not just more bricks. So, you're going to see a deck here in a second that has 2 stage 2s, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's just obviously bad. You are going to have games where you brick, obviously, but again, the more evolutions you play, the idea is the more you're evolving. So that means that you're getting to your game plan, even though you're playing multiple evolution lines. But again, cool deck. It lost on the bubble. I was very interested to see how he ended up doing. You can see his matches as well, kind of break down his matchups. Pidgeot and Muck, not really a real deck. Pikachu and Electrode, win. Mewtwo and Gardevoir, win. And then loses to Pikachu and Electrode. Wins against 2 Fire decks, which is really impressive, right? 2 Charizard and Moltres decks. And then, losing on the bubble there at the end to Water, of all things. And then losing to Mewtwo and Gardevoir. So 1-1 against Mewtwo, Gardevoir. 2-0 against Charizard. And then 1-1 against Electrode and Pikachu. So again, just kind of emphasizes, if you're going to play a tournament, a deck that is kind of out of the norm, right, out of the big 3, it needs to be able to go toe to toe with at least 2 out of the 3 decks, and he did that, but still ends up coming up short on the bubble. But again, hey man, well played, cool deck. Really hope you keep playing. So let's get to the best finisher out of the rogue decks. Got top 4, lost in top 4 to a Pikachu deck. This is the deck that I was just alluding to. It plays 2 stage 2s. Okay, but again, really interesting. Kangaskhan here is kind of acting like a miniature Exeggutor, like a base Exeggutor. It's got 100 HP. Here's the biggest weakness with that 100 HP. Giovanni and Pikachu can one-shot it. That's the biggest weakness. But outside of that, you can coin flip, chip some damage in a lot of important ways, and potentially donk your opponent with that 1 energy attack. So the reason why they're playing Kangaskhan is they wanted to play 6 basic Pokemon as opposed to the normal 4 that we've seen in a lot of decks. So that way, hey, if one of your basics gets knocked out, you're not just stuck with a bunch of dead cards because now you need to find the other copy of your basic. So again, really cool innovation, playing Kadabra, playing Alakazam, playing Frogboy, playing Greninja, all in the same deck, 2 different energy types. And if you want to know what Alakazam does, this is Alakazam, and this is the reason why they were able to get away with it. Alakazam only needs 1 psychic energy. So, Kadabra is probably dead, right? You're just waiting to evolve it. But with Alakazam, you only need 1 psychic energy. So you can attach water energies to Alakazam to kind of cycle through your energies, and then eventually, hopefully get to a psychic energy and still be able to one-shot Pikachu. So again, this is going to one-shot a lot of EXs. This is a 1-prize deck, okay? So that's a really big factor. So basically, you're hoping to trade your 1-prize Pokemon for 2-prize Pokemon. So again, this deck was able to have a lot of success. Maybe this lays the blueprint for more people to try to brew with 2 stage 2s with that 6 basic Pokemon lineup. Either way, it's a very interesting thing. Really cool deck. It's good to shout out to some people that try to innovate and do some different things. Hopefully you know what Greninja does, right? But again, you may not be so familiar with Alakazam because it is a little bit more niche, right? But again, 60 damage plus 30 for each energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon. So you could potentially deal as much as 150 if your opponent has 3 energies attached, which could be a one-hit KO on a Mewtwo. Or, you know, hey, it could come up slightly short against Mewtwo because Mewtwo may only have 2 energy in a lot of the cases that you run up against it. So there's a little bit of information for you. I hope you got some good information out of this. And again, I appreciate you for taking time out of your day to watch my videos. But there should be some more videos popping up here in a few seconds, and I hope you check them out as well. Peace.